It started on a night that felt heavier than most. The air was still, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of a candle that had nearly burned itself out. I sat there with my thoughts, those same thoughts that had followed me for years. The ones that whispered quietly but pierced like knives. The ones that said, asterisk, you should have done better. You should have prayed harder. You should have been stronger. Asterisk. And I believed every word. I felt like I had disappointed God one too many times, like I had used up every ounce of grace He had to give. I had sung about His mercy, talked about His love, even told others to trust in His forgiveness. But that night, I couldn't feel it for myself. I looked around and saw reminders of the things I had promised to do and never finished. My Bible sat closed on the table, dust on its cover, while guilt sat heavy on my chest. I had chosen distraction over devotion, comfort over conviction, excuses over prayer. And it wasn't that I didn't. Love Him I did, but my love had always been so weak compared to His. That realization broke something in me. I felt like a child who kept coming home dirty after being cleaned again and again. And I thought to myself, asterisk, how long before even He gets tired? Asterisk. So I asked the question. I had been too afraid to speak before. Jesus, why do you still love me? My voice cracked when I said it. It wasn't a dramatic prayer, not the kind you'd expect from someone full of faith. It was trembling and small, the kind that carries more tears than words. I didn't even know if I expected an answer. I just needed to say it, to confess what I had carried inside for so long, the fear that maybe one day His patience would run out. I thought about all the moments I had felt Him near and still walked away. The mornings I woke up too tired to pray. The nights I scrolled endlessly, ignoring the quiet pull to talk to Him. The words I spoke that hurt people. The pride I carried when I thought no one could see it. And yet, there had always been this presence. A warmth that refused to leave. It was confusing. It didn't make sense to me. Why would He still stay when I had given Him so many reasons to walk away? That question echoed in the silence, louder than my heartbeat. My tears fell freely, my hands shaking as if I could somehow hold on to the pieces of myself that were breaking apart. I wasn't just asking why. He loved me. I was really asking, asterisk, am I still worth loving? Asterisk. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't believing that Jesus loves the world. It's believing that He still loves you times after everything you've done. And in that quiet, I felt something shift. Not around me, inside me. The guilt didn't vanish, but it softened. The shame didn't scream as loud. It was like my heart was finally honest enough to be heard. That night was the breaking point not just of my strength, but of my resistance. I had run out of ways to justify myself, and all that was left was the truth. I couldn't earn His love. I couldn't deserve it. I couldn't pay Him back for it. All I could do was face the weight of who I was and wait for Him to speak into it. The moment after I asked that question, the room felt still not empty, but full of something I couldn't describe. It wasn't the kind of silence that makes you lonely. It was the kind that feels alive, like it's listening. My tears had slowed, my breath unsteady, and somewhere between the ache and the quiet, I felt it. Not a voice, not a sound, but a presence. It wasn't stern or distant. It was gentle, patient, almost like someone sitting beside me, waiting for me to calm down enough to hear. I expected judgment. I expected that heavy feeling of guilt pressing harder. But instead, there was warmth, a kind that didn't belong to the candle burning out on my table. In that silence, I could almost feel Him saying, asterisk, I never stopped loving you. Asterisk. It wasn't thunderous or grand, but the words settled deep, so deep that my soul seemed to tremble. I didn't hear them with my ears. I felt them in my spirit. It was as if every accusation I had thrown at myself, every reason I had given for why He shouldn't care anymore, was being met with nothing but quiet compassion. And that compassion broke me even more than guilt ever could. Because guilt punishes, but love melts the walls you build around your heart. I remember closing my eyes, hoping to hold on to that stillness. I had been so afraid that my distance had pushed Him away, that my inconsistency had made Him tired of me. But the whisper of grace said otherwise. It reminded me that his love was never based on my perfection. It was based on his promise. The kind of promise that doesn't fade when you fail, that doesn't end when you fall silent. That was the whisper I felt that night, a love that was not demanding, not disappointed, just constant. I thought back to every time I'd returned to him, ashamed, and every time I'd found peace waiting. I remembered moments when I should have been punished, but instead found patience. Times I thought he was quiet because he had left, but really, he was just giving me space to listen. That realization hit me differently. Grace wasn't ignoring my sin. It was loving me through it. It wasn't pretending I hadn't fallen. It was offering me a hand to stand again. That's what I felt that night. Not the kind of love that excuses you, but the kind that restores you. And the more I sat there, the clearer it became that he hadn't just forgiven me once. He had been forgiving me every single time I returned. Every time I said, "I'll do better," and didn't. Every time I let fear or laziness win. His love hadn't grown weaker. Mine just hadn't learned how to stay. But he stayed. He stayed through my doubts, my silence, my wandering. That was his answer, not in words, but in presence. The whisper of grace told me that his love wasn't reactive. It was redemptive. It didn't show up because I finally prayed enough or repented perfectly. It was there long before I realized how much I needed it. It was steady, unchanging, and it wasn't trying to prove anything, it just was. The longer I sat in that quiet, the more I realized that what I thought was absence had been mercy. Mercy waiting patiently for my heart to open again. Mercy that didn't rush to speak. Because love doesn't need to shout to be heard. When I finally understood what that stillness meant, it was like seeing a truth I had known all along but never dared to believe. His love didn't make sense to me. It went against everything I had been taught about earning affection, about proving worth. In the world, love fades when you fail. People withdraw when you disappoint them. Promises depend on performance. But this was different. This love wasn't logical. It didn't wait for me to clean myself up or make things right before it reached me. It came into the mess, into the guilt, into the place where I least deserved it. It wasn't love that looked at what I had done. It was love that looked at who I was and still chose me. For the first time, I realized that I had been measuring his love by human standards. I thought if I prayed enough, served enough, stayed strong enough, then maybe I could keep it. But love that has to be earned isn't love. It's a transaction. And Jesus never offered a transaction. He offered himself. His love wasn't dependent on how faithful I was. It was rooted in how faithful he is. That's why no matter how many times I wandered, the road back to him was never closed. Because his love wasn't built on my ability to hold on to him. It was built on his promise to never let go of me. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet tears. It was the kind of truth that humbles you completely. I saw how often I had treated his love like something fragile, like it would break if I made one more mistake. But the truth was, his love had already survived everything I had done. It had endured my anger, my rebellion, my silence, and still remained whole. There is a strength in divine love that no failure can weaken. It doesn't run out, because it was never fueled by my effort. It was fueled by his nature, and his nature is love. Not just loving, but times love itself. Asterisk. I thought about all the people who had given up on me before, the times I had given up on myself, and it only made the weight of his love feel heavier, because he had every reason to walk away, yet he stayed. He had seen every hidden thought, every selfish decision, every broken promise, and still, his love didn't hesitate. It didn't pause to reconsider. It simply stayed the same. That kind of love doesn't make sense to the human heart, because we're so used to conditions. We think love is a reward for goodness, but his love is the reason we can even start to become good. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this love wasn't logical. It was supernatural. It wasn't a feeling that came and went. It was an unbreakable choice he had already made long before I ever failed. It wasn't dependent on my worthiness, because it was His love that made me worthy in the first place. Every time I tried to make sense of it, I found myself undone. It's the kind of love that looks at your worst and still calls you beloved. It's the kind that doesn't ask you to fix yourself before coming home, but instead meets you on the road and walks with you back. It's not a love that makes sense to the mind, but it's the only love that truly heals the heart. The moment I stopped trying to understand His love and just received it, something began to change inside me. I had spent so long trying to hide the broken parts, trying to cover the cracks so I could appear strong, faithful, worthy. But when His grace met me, in that quiet space, I realized He wasn't asking me to pretend anymore. He wasn't waiting for me to get it all together. He was waiting for me to be honest. Healing doesn't begin when you become perfect. It begins when you finally tell the truth. And that night, I told the truth. I told Him I was tired, ashamed, confused, and afraid. I told Him I didn't know how to stop falling, how to stop feeling distant. And instead of meeting my confession with disappointment, I felt peace washing over every word I spoke. It's a strange thing to experience the freedom that comes from admitting your weakness. The world teaches us to hide what's broken, to smile through the pain, to only show the best parts. But Jesus meets us right in the middle of our worst parts. When I laid down the weight of pretending, I finally made room for His presence to move. I realized that healing wasn't about erasing my past. It was about seeing my past through His mercy. Every mistake I had tried to bury became a place where His grace could grow something new. There's something powerful about honesty before God. It's not about shocking Him. He already knows everything. It's about opening yourself enough to let Him touch what you've been protecting. I had built walls made of shame, thinking they would keep me safe from judgment, but they only kept me from feeling His love fully. When I began to take those walls down, piece by piece, I found that His love wasn't standing on the other side waiting for me to finish. It was already there, inside those walls, waiting for me to notice. Healing through truth means you stop running. You stop trying to manage your guilt and start surrendering it. You stop acting like you have to earn a seat at His table and start realizing He's already saved you a place. That realization softened every hard edge in me. It taught me that grace doesn't erase what happened, it redeems it. The things I once saw as proof of my failure became evidence of His faithfulness. Every time I fell, He was there to lift me, not because I deserved it, but because He refused to leave me in the dirt. As I sat there, reflecting, it hit me that His love wasn't just about forgiving sins. It was about restoring the person beneath them. It wasn't just about cleaning the surface. It was about healing the heart. He doesn't just fix what's broken. He transforms it. He turns guilt into gratitude, weakness into worship, and fear into faith. And that happens only when you stop hiding and start speaking truth. That night, my healing didn't come from loud prayers or perfect repentance. It came from quiet honesty. It came from letting myself be seen completely and realizing I was still loved completely. The more I confessed, the more peace I felt. Not because I was getting everything right, but because I was finally letting Him in. Truth became the doorway, and grace became the light that walked through it. I understood then that healing isn't something you achieve. It's something you allow when you stop pretending you don't need it. When His love finally settled into the deepest parts of me, something quiet but powerful began to happen. I started to see myself differently. For so long, I had looked in the mirror and only seen what I wasn't. Not good enough, not faithful enough, not strong enough. But His love began to rewrite that reflection. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some sudden burst of confidence or joy. It was gentle, like dawn breaking after a long night. I began to understand that His love wasn't just about forgiving me. It was about teaching me how to live loved. When you realize how deeply you're loved, it changes the way you see everything, especially yourself. For years, I had treated His love like a rescue mission, something that pulled me out of the pit but then expected me to find my own way after. But I learned that His love doesn't just save. It stays. It walks beside you through the process. It keeps whispering truth when shame tries to speak louder. And in time, you start to believe what He says more than what your guilt says. You start to see your scars not as reminders of your failure, but as proof that grace met you there. That's when I began to love myself differently. Not with pride, not with ego, but with gratitude. I started forgiving myself for things I had long held against me. I stopped treating my weakness like an enemy and started seeing it as the place where His strength shines the brightest. I learned that the same Jesus who could love me at my worst was also teaching me how to see myself through His eyes. And in His eyes, I wasn't broken beyond repair. I was someone He chose to redeem, someone He refused to give up on. When that truth takes root, your entire heart shifts. You stop chasing approval because you realize you already have it. You stop begging for love because you realize you've been living in it all along. You begin to love others more gently because you finally understand how gently He's loved you. That's what transformation looks like. Not perfection, but peace. The kind of peace that says, I may not be who I want to be yet, but I'm no longer who I was. I started to notice small changes. The way I prayed felt different, not desperate, but thankful. The way I faced my days carried a quiet assurance that I wasn't alone. I stopped waiting to feel worthy of love before I accepted it. I realized I was already loved, and that truth was what made me worthy. I stopped measuring my faith by how often I fell, and started measuring it by how often I got back up, because His love was in the getting back up. There's a kind of beauty that only comes after being broken and made whole again. It's not the beauty of perfection, but the beauty of redemption. And I could feel that redemption moving through every part of me that had once felt too damaged to be used. The love that once broke me in the best way was now building me back together with gentler hands. I found that I no longer needed to prove my love to Him. I just needed to live from it. I began to love others, not out of obligation, but because I finally understood how much I had been loved first.